done for me lately? Exclude, what have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk 2. And this is Wednesday night. Usually Sister Azim and myself, we usually do a show on Tuesday night, but I had a little bit of issues going on last night. Sister Azima sent me some bad weather that I didn't anticipate. So we're here tonight, and actually I wish that we would have been able to do the show last night because this is a two-part show, and I will be honest with you guys. I'm really excited for part 2 of the show. But we have to get to part 1 first because we had some things that we were discussing already when we were already discussing the Constitution. And we realized that last week there was a decision made. The Supreme Court, last June 28th, the Supreme Court ruling on President Donald Trump executive order didn't halt birthright citizenship, but it did restrict the power of federal judges to issue nationwide injunctions that grant legal relief in the matter. In his 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court favored Trump's request to temporarily halt nationwide injunctions from district courts on birthright citizenship, saying that the lower courts exceeded their authority. The Supreme Court limits national injunctions in birthright citizenship. They did not, however, rule on the constitutionality of birthright citizenship, which has been guaranteed under the 14th Amendment, leaving the issue in limbo for the time being. What does this mean? Trump issued an executive order on January directing federal agencies to refuse to recognize the citizenship of children born in the United States who do not have at least one parent who is an American citizen or lawful permanent residents. The order sparked several lawsuits, and federal judges in Maryland, Washington, and Massachusetts blocked the order nationwide, saying it violates the Constitution's 14th Amendment citizenship language. Their rulings halted enforcement of Trump's directives while litigation made its way through the courts. But now the Supreme Court said those 3 lower courts need to move quickly to narrow their injunctions against Trump's executive order. What is shocking is so many people about this decision, even though it's a procedural decision, it is a procedural decision that relates to the fundamental area of the people's birthplace in the United States. Michelle Goodwin, a constitutional law professor of Georgetown University Law School, said. So, with that, Sister Azima, Chief Mimi, and myself, we've been discussing this Constitution, and we've been waiting for this decision. And SCOTUS has basically, the Supreme Court has basically, they won't be back in session until October. So know that when they come back in October, this is where the challenges really are going to heat up. Because if you listen to their decision and understand the decision, the federal judges don't got the authority. They were going upon their scopability authority to make a decision and put an injunction on anything that Trump had to do. That's only SCOTUS's, that's their jurisdiction. So, Sister Azima, what's up?
I think the action that we see them doing is one, we know it serves a purpose, but not the purpose most people know. Number two, it divides a country. And number three, they didn't do it to Barack Obama. They didn't do it to Bill Clinton. And they didn't do it to Bush number two. All of them had deported illegal immigrants in the hundreds of thousands. Why is it Trump that they're after? And I'm going to go back to something I said to you all in the very beginning when he brought me on. We know we talked about frequency. We haven't been back to talk about it. But we are in a time of the Great Jubilee. And that what's happening is that the entire solar system is moving to a place of ascension, which means that the old order, the old world order, can no longer be in control. They have ruled the world through fear, hatred, separation, uh, gender dysphoria or dysmorphism, and through money and scarcity. This planet is abundant. But if you're told that you don't have anything, you'll say that's true. When you move people away from the inner core of your country to only your city states, then you have to provide for them. This is where the law of scarcity comes in. This is where the law of segregation, separation, this is the law of mistrust. That's why they use lies. Our title, Lies, Beliefs, and Truth. Well, if you lie to a person long enough, they will believe it. When they die, before they die, they pass their belief on to their children. So now it becomes intergenerational and the lie gains momentum. What's happening is that in the current situation, our archaeologists and historians are finding out that we've been lied to on every scale, on all seven pillars of what makes a society. And now that they're after Trump, they are afraid that Trump is trying to live up to the rules of engagement under the Constitution. He's trying to bring balance back to America. Anything we do in the United States of America affects a lot of people around the world. So, of course, like our friend Dr. Short said, this would be the year in which they will use the face of Black people to either help us do better or bring us to our knees. And so you'll see the Jasmine Crockett's, you'll see the Maxine Waters, the Gales and the Oprahs and the Whoopies. They're going to be out here talking crazy. And that's what they're doing. So when Trump said, I don't have to keep anybody here who is not a naturalized citizen and hadn't gone through the proper channels, and he based it on Amendment 14. Go and read the amendment. We were the only people that were added to that amendment. Do you have
Okay,
any?
okay, great. I'm glad you said that point
Mm-hmm.
because that Sister Azima, and I know that we can have this conversation because we agree on a lot of what we will be talking about. But allow
Mm-hmm.
me, for the sake of the conversation, right, to play, as some would say, devil's advocate. When we talk about the fear mongering, when SCOTUS came down with this decision, you had a lot of melanated folk who traditionally that this constitution, this amendment was written for, where they were regurgitating what is being told to them. Oh, you're next. They're going to deport you next. They coming for you next. And they really believe that they're next. Explain, like he said, and the word that Donald Trump used is the word that he used. He said it was there for the babies of slaves, the descendants of slaves. He clearly knows the language in the amendment. He knows it. It said the language actually says it was for the freedmen, but he clearly knows why the amendment is there. And what, in your opinion, is he trying to convey to people by calling on this amendment in his flight to get people to understand about these anchor babies and why the anchor babies should not have citizenship?
Well, it would be, I guess the parable I would give is whether you're renting a house, an apartment, or if you own a home, do you open your doors to strangers and allow them to come in and give them everything that you have at the expense and the detriment of you and your family, or just you and yourself? And then stand firmly on protecting them. Now, here's what I throw out to you. You know, before a lot of them were, before the illegal immigrants were moved to sanctuary states, they opened the borders all along Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and they were allowing them to come in the southern part of California. It didn't matter under the Biden administration whether or not this was happening. The only time it became an issue is when these Republican governors were like, we're not, no, no, we're not doing that. Okay. And I think a lot of people have it in your mind that there was this gigantic wall already there and that people had to come through certain uh, cross
Point.
gates or, entry points. Well, no, you can go to Brownville, Texas and walk across that little line. It just divides. You can, it's like the yellow line that goes down your street when you're driving your car. You literally can walk across that line and be in Mexico. There are farmers in that region of Texas that had bought land from the Mexican government and understood that they would pay taxes and whatever because they were big cattlemen and they had cattle in America and in Mexico, which meant they never put up a border. Why? Because their cattle is going across that area. So there were a lot of areas that they didn't have it. That only became an issue back under the Clinton administration when they began to build the tunnels and the cartel aided by the CIA, the Mexican gangs aided by the CIA made them into militias. And those militias were coming across the American border, and they had to come across using tunnels because once our president found out what was happening, he incorporated, whether it was Clinton or Bush or Obama, they put more border patrol there. Okay. And they stepped up their manpower in ICE. So when they did that, it was to curb them coming through the tunnels that they built underground. And that's when they started putting the wall up. The wall was going up above ground, but they were also going down deep into the ground so that they could hopefully cut off those tunnels. It only became an issue when Donald Trump won the first time. He was not planning to run for president. It was never in his scope. Everybody asked him, he said no, and they're going like, well, he was just that way. No, he was a Democrat. He had no reason to run. He was approached by a faction of our military and said, that they needed for him to run. They wanted his votes to go to Bernie Sanders. Remember, Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary Clinton. When Hillary got to Ohio, Michigan, states like that, the black people there didn't like her. And when she came and campaigned, they showed up. They protested. And many of those black women were mad because her policies was affecting their sons and and incarcerating them, putting them in the pipeline to prison. Remember,
Why,
she's the one
why,
that
why have we forget that she said they were predators?
right, and she said all those horrible things, and these women stood up. So outside forces asked for Donald Trump to run. They wanted to split the vote, hoping that the majority of the vote would go to Bernie Sanders. When Trump came on board, he couldn't run as a Democrat. So he ran under the Republican Party. And when he did, he won the vote. And it threw him for a loop because every president runs with a vice president. Think about it. When Trump was running in 2016, he didn't have a vice president with him. He earned that vice president after he won that election. He didn't even have a cabinet picked because he never thought he was going to win. He was assured it would go to Bernie Sanders. And the people said, not Bernie, not Hillary, not Bernie. And so the infighting began within the Democratic Party when Trump won. Even the rhinos, these are the old heads of the Republican Party who had the same mindset of capitalism, new world order, blah, 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 population reduction, all of that. It was there. And so now these junior House representatives on the Democratic side, they can only serve 2 years, people, just 2 years. But what they do is that they come in and the Democratic Party groomed them, okay, and made sure they said certain things. Nobody ever heard of Miss Crockett until they put her on the front stage to start talking about Donald Trump because she could yell the loudest and she's supposed to be pretty and all this kind of stuff. But she ended up being a potty mouth.
We're gonna address her.
Okay.
We're gonna address her. I want to ask you a question though. And
Mm-hmm.
back to so we understand with DACA, we understand who really had the little people in the cages. I don't want to say it over YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
What president was in office with the little people was in the cages?
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a president that comes in and then it would only seem logical that that would be something that would affect everybody because it is a race or a issue of resources. Here it
Mm-hmm.
is. We have illegals coming in the country in hundreds, thousands, millions of numbers, and we're saying we don't have resources. We got a homeless problem in America, but we got resources to give illegals unlimited amount of food stamps, rent, room and board, hotels in New York and Chicago, in these sanctuary cities. But in the meantime, we have homeless veterans walking the street. So it would only seem logical that a president would pick up on that, run on that, and then why do you think it's so much instead of the Democratic Party saying, look, we don't agree with what you're doing, and we're going to explain what you're doing, how it's hurting us, whether I agree with it or not, or whether you agree with it or not. Why do they continue going down this fear mongering avenue? Like, he's doing this. In actuality, he's clarifying the Constitution. He's not hurting the Constitution. He's getting them to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
What
What
do
do I
you
think
think that?
about?
Yeah.
Well, I want everybody to, whenever they have their swearing in or the inaugurational address and they're swearing the president in, remember he says these important words, including your judges. I stand here before you and they're going to swear their allegiance to the Constitution. They'll say that I swear my allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America. Every president says that. But remember, most presidents outside of Donald Trump are members of Skull and Bone, your secret societies. And their allegiance is to the secret societies. Go back and read about, you know, Jackal Island. Go back and read about you. They call them the Illuminati, but they were the secret societies. When John F. Kennedy addressed it in his speech before he went to Dallas, Texas, he said, no society, I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to paraphrase it. He said, no society should be run by those who work in the dead of night, undercover, great darkness,
Shadows.
right, or in secret manners. And so right after that, they eliminated him. Okay, so any president who talked against that, remember these secret societies had existed, but it was Harry S. Truman that gave him the power. Because he said at the end, when he was no longer president, he said, I hang my head in shame for bringing in the military industrial complex. My people, and he didn't necessarily mean black folks, but he meant the white people in America, they will have no recourse. They will become slaves to a minute group of rulers. And so he's the one that opened the door. And the only thing they've done is train their children to keep their foot on your neck. And they will use whoever they have to. They will use females if they have to. When they had the women's movement, Gloria Steinem and all of that. And then you went from that all the way to the LBGT community. The sad part is that the majority of the LBG community did not support all of this transgenderism and all of this stuff. They never supported it. Okay. And then you have, then it moves on. So what they do is that they are opportunists. It's only 120 families that are trying to run the entire world. And they have an agenda. The problem is that you can't see the agenda. The agenda is always 20 years out, 20 to 25 years. And so what happens is that they plan now for 2050. You're planning to get where you're going next week. And so when everything pops off or happens, you're like, oh my God, why? No, it's not why, it's how they do this. And that included the Democratic Party. That included the rhinos, the old heads. Okay. So, but what we're seeing now is that the Democratic Party, the many of the rhinos basically either buttoned up, stepped down, or they died off. And the other Republicans who came on board are supporting that constitutional piece. Remember now, they removed you, the freedman, the freed slave who helped create the Republican Party. They'll have you believing that never happened. And then they'll turn around and tell you the Dixiecrats are the ones that gave you the Klan, that gave you the lynch laws and all of these types of things, put them in place, and also gave you the lies. And you believe the lies so much. These are the same people who wrote the slave Bible. Okay? So they know how to manipulate and massage the system. Remember, we're predators, we're all these terrible things. And what did Donald Trump do? They said he was a misogynist. He was a womanizer. He was all of these things. And they kept going about Stormy Daniels. Whatever it was between him and Stormy Daniels, he cut her a check. He paid her off 8 years before he ran for president. Okay. And then they said all these things, drug him through the mire because they knew that he is the one that's going to bring about what they call the great change, the great jubilee. And I laugh about that. Everybody wants this. Okay, everybody is looking for a blonde haired, blue eyed white man that looks effeminate and speaks softly but carries a big stick. That's a myth. That's a myth. That's the what is it called? When you're amorphosizing a person, making them bigger than what they really are. And it's kind of hard to be all of that in the middle of Africa. If you're born and raised in Africa, you're not going to be blonde haired, blue eyed. It even states it in your Bible. It tells you, they tell you that Moses blended in. He looked like the Nubians, okay? He
Let
looked
me
like.
let me ask you, right? Let me
Mhm.
ask you, and I kind of know what your answer is. How should we? What? How do you? First, I'm gonna ask you, how do you and how do you think the majority of people view the Constitution?
The vast, you mean black people?
Yeah, how
They
do they
don't know
view it?
it.
How
They
how do
don't.
they view it? Like, what does it mean? Like, forget
They
what it
don't know it.
says,
They
but
don't
what
know it.
does?
They don't know
Okay,
it. That answers they don't know it. By choice, they don't know it. And those of us that were free, I mean those melanated skinned people who were freedmen, as well as the foundational, the indigenous population of dark Indians, they don't know it. The dark Indians had already created their Articles of Confederation, and
so
the
we've been having that discussion, and you come to find out that a lot of people feel like even Chief Mimi said, like they think that the Constitution was written for other people instead of not realizing that they wrote the Constitution for themselves. That this was checks and balances for the people, how to check the government, how to keep the government in tow.
okay, but I want you to understand, we don't mean the United States of America government at that time. We meant the colonial government.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that, because there were just 13 colonies here, and none of them asked permission to be on this land. And so when the Confederation of Indigenous People confronted their leaders, then they said, we need to write up stuff. These indigenous people didn't want a treaty. They wanted a constitution letting them know you do not have certain rights on our land. And the people that you have here, now that we realize the majority of them are from your penal system, they need to be housed somewhere. And they wanted to house them on the reservations. It was not for the indigenous people to be on the reservation. The reservations were made for those people who came here from England, Ireland, all that who were prisoners, and they needed
What's
to
the
house them.
etymology of slave?
Huh?
What's the etymology of slave?
Yeah, the etymology of slaves. You're coming from from the Slavic regions, okay? And so the purpose of the slave is to serve the master. And you're going to be in bondage for the rest of your life. You don't ever get a chance to be anything different. You are a slave. You're going to be a person working always. You won't even be affected by the Constitution because it isn't for you. It was for the people from England, the royal houses, to let them know the indigenous people don't adhere to that. But the preamble and all that, melanated skinned people, indigenous Indians, and melanated skinned people, freed ones, came together and helped draft that. They're going to tell you every white man drafted that. That piece of paperwork, when was it? Was it September or October of 1779 when it was finally accepted by Congress? not July 4th, 1776. So what happens is that once you collectively, the mindset for enslaved people was that you can only believe what comes out of my mouth as your white master. Don't believe anything else. And it was purposeful that you could not read and write. But I also want you to know the colonists who came here couldn't read and write either. They were illiterate, not stupid. Illiteracy does not mark you as being stupid or unintelligent. It merely means that I cannot read and write this language you've placed before me. And they use that. And we do it to ourselves. Anything of value put in a book, black people ain't gonna read. We do it to ourselves. We have been taught to denigrate ourselves. And so you put that in your mind. Many of your gospel songs, I'm a wretch like me, Jesus is gonna come and save me. Listen to the lyrics, listen to the words that you use. That construct is not missed on anybody but you, melanated skinned people.
So for the sake of the conversation, right?
Mhm.
Why would I, and this is not me, I'm just using myself as an example. This person to clip this and be like, oh, he said he why would a person whose family goes back to being indigenous to this land, whose family goes back to being part of chattel slavery,
Mhm.
why would that person be worried about birthright citizenship being challenged?
Why would an ex-slave?
Descendant of an ex-slave be worried about this being challenged?
They shouldn't be.
Thank you.
They shouldn't be at all. You are not an immigrant. Remember
And I
that.
think that, and that's one of the things that I don't know if a lot of people, and I know, you know, I never wanted to really talk about politics that way, but like one of my mentors said, well, politics talk about you. And sometimes you don't really understand how these decision makers make decisions that affect your life, your day-to-day life. You just be like, okay, I'll just go about my day, I'll make my happiness my peace, and I just worry about what goes on with it with me and how I do it, right?
Mhm.
When I started hearing the messaging from the Democratic Party with trying to say this is a nation of immigrants,
Mm-mm.
you
Mm-mm.
don't hear the Republicans say that.
Mm-mm.
The
Mm-mm.
Democrats say that, and I'm like, why would they say that? Why would a person like myself, like yourself,
Mhm.
who and you could trace your lineage back way further than mine. Why would anybody that could trace their lineage back to
Mhm.
a specific time
Mhm.
ever, ever, ever
Mhm.
co-sign or allow someone to say to them
Mhm.
that we are a nation of immigrants?
Because they are upholding the New World Order agenda. They are upholding Margaret Sanger's eugenics. They are upholding something on the pretext that in the end, they will be able to remain in office or be given some type of award, talisman, or token so that no one will forget them. They are absolutely forgettable. That's the sad part. People are angry with them now, but once they are out of the limelight, they are forgettable. They are disposable. And the biggest thing, and I said it to you all in the beginning, the frequency that Black people put out is the same frequency that balances this planet. And those who are in control don't have that energy to do that. So, what do? It's like being in an abusive relationship, whether the mother's abusing the children or the husband is abusing the wife. The bottom line is it's all about control. If I cannot control you, that brings in the masses of resources for me. Remember now, we worked and they got everything free. Did they pay you to pick cotton? No. Did they pay you to do tobacco? No. They gave you less than minimum wage when you were free. Could you get housing? No. But we did those things anyway. Look at what we there was when I was growing up, there was no such thing as a lunch program or a breakfast program. You ate at home, or your whoever made you a lunch and breakfast, and you went to school eating it. There was no such thing as a lunch program. Well, what happens? Black Panther introduces it. Okay. Kindergarten wasn't a big thing
Now it
either.
became standard.
It became standard. So what I'm saying is that the things that we do become standard. Go to the movie Hidden Figures. Those women were there 10 years before I started working for NASA. You never knew about them until a movie was made. Look at what medicine has. If it wasn't for Henrietta Lacks's cells, you wouldn't even be able to have some of the drugs that they make. And the sad part is that they took her genes and created viruses from her genes because her genes were continuing to live on. Even after they had extracted them from her body, they were still living, and they're still living to this day. So think about that. We are, they have used us to make books, shoes, they've dug up the ancient Egyptians or any mummified body, crushed it up and drank it, thinking it was going to give them power. We have been indispensable to them. That is why they fight Africa now, because Africa says you got to leave the continent. Africa is not a country, it's a continent of 52 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And not all of them are on board, but the vast majority of them are on board. And they're saying no. So what happened? France got an attitude and went to Trump and told Trump, you got to tell that guy in Burkina Faso that we want to still come in there and get the gold and all of this. And Trump's like, that's somebody else's country. I can try to meet with him and try to help you all negotiate. That is not what they want. If you are in control, you want to remain in control at any cost, by all means necessary. If you have to dumb them down, if you have to kill off their I don't want to call them senior citizens, but their aged ones, their learned ones, you do that. Look at China. When Mao came in, he was mad at all the educated people, and he began to systemically, through a system, find them guilty and eliminated them. And then he enforced the One Child Act. Females had no value, only men. But that's a patrilineal mindset. And so when you have a patrilineal mindset, that's what happens. And you're going to use whoever is available. Right now, it's Black women in politics. So they're going to use, Oprah. She's not in politics, but she's a very public person. They're going to use Gayle King, Joy Reid. They're looking at Jasmine Crockett, Maxine Waters, that woman, LaMonica MacGyver. They're using all of them. Why? Because in our culture, we have deep respect for our elders. The first thing, because look at them outside of Jasmine Crockett, most of them are elders. And the other thing is that we hold our women in high esteem. So when we speak, everybody listens. But when you speak, when you use the right words in the wrong way, you're going to get the wrong result no matter what. And that's what they're doing. And these women are receiving some type of benefit, some type of gratuity, some type of acknowledgement, a pat on the back. Most of the time, our people just want a pat on the back and be acknowledged by the white patrilineal establishment. That doesn't work for me. And it shouldn't work for you.
Let me
But
ask
I
you a
do
question
know, wait just one minute,
because,
please.
okay, go ahead.
I do know that when they create confusion, the first thing most people do, and we know it, when you get into a household and it's confused, You say, no, I'm not dealing with this, and you walk out. And the minute you say no, you shut your mind off to all other possibilities of truth and can only accept the lie. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not aging you when I ask you these questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not aging you. But we like to call it what it is, saying that these people are illegal immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people nowadays don't remember the term that was used towards the Italians when they came to this country.
Yeah, wops. I remember that. And being
And
illegal.
they didn't understand. A lot of people don't understand what the acronym meant.
Okay.
So you were a little girl who was taught the history of your family by your family,
Mm-hmm.
and you heard that term. You came on the end of that term when they called the Italians that acronym.
Mm-hmm.
What does it stand for? Because I don't think people really get what it stands for.
Wait a minute.
Without papers.
Yes, without papers. That's right. A WAP without papers.
Without papers. And they,
Mm-hmm.
they, they made the term a derogatory term,
Mm-hmm.
but they were basically saying how these people were coming in the country undocumented,
Mm-hmm.
illegal, and they just happened to be from a certain ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
Was it so much? I know that we dealing with a different time and technology. Um, was it so much uh, sentiment for those people back then that you can remember?
No. 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 And the Irish who came here. There was
Because of
no
the family.
sentiment. Uh-huh. There was no sentiment for the Asians that came. They were chinks. Okay, so even the Irish, they had, I forgot what the Irish name was for them, but anybody that came here who was not white Anglo-Saxon
Mhm.
or a descendant of the royal family or from the Queen's Court or religious court at that time, the Catholic Church was illegal. They were not allowed to be here, and they put them in ghettos.
Mhm. The word ghetto comes from them, actually.
Mhm. So they put them there, and their children had to work. There was it was horrible. Places were dirty, filled with roaches and rats, mice. A lot of them got sick. The plague was abundant. The area stunk. They came here with their old world habits, throwing. Well, the Italians they were around the creek, so they knew that all about toilets and that kind of stuff. But many of the other ones didn't. They would throw their waste right out the front window. That was why the men wore the tall hats. So when it hit, it would bellow down off of them. And the women had to walk on the outside because the men walked close to the building. So all of this would fall on them and not on the women. Cities were horrible.
The
They were
reason
packed in here.
what made me bring that up is because I think that a lot of people don't understand or don't remember or don't care to remember how Italians, those Irish that came,
Hmm.
those Asians that came, how because of assimilation
Hmm.
that they have assimilated to being considered what we would say is white and not realizing there was a time in this country where they were hanging out with their brothers, the melanated folk.
Well, I mean, they would call the Irish the dark Irish, and they called the Italians the dark Italians. And they would only speak to those Italians that looked more like the Nordic Italians. They didn't want to talk to the ones that had the dark hair and the dark eyes, even though their skin may be lighter. So they didn't really assimilate. What happened was that when the white Anglo Saxons i.e., the Catholics, realized that their birth rates were going south only because many of us were now being prolific in the birthing of children and all that kind of thing. They decided to allow those people to be categorized as white on paper, but not
Ding,
in
ding, ding,
society.
ding, 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 ding.
They could be categorized as white on paper. Now, when I
And,
worked for NASA, there were some guys that had worked with us that had come from some countries in Africa and places like that. And they showed me their immigration papers, and they were considered white, WHITE, not Caucasian, white.
and for you guys in the chat, if you ever want to do some research on it, what Sister Azima is saying is correct. And some actually people from Italy, Ireland, Asian countries, they actually sued the government to
Hmm.
say to be considered white. They
Hmm.
actually sued the United States government
Hmm.
to be considered white.
Now, the black people didn't have. I'm not going to say they were the nicest people, but there
No,
wasn't this
our codes
true,
did nothing like that.
though there wasn't this true war or battle between us and the Irish and the Germans and all that. But what happened was that in order for those people to become full citizens, they had to adhere to those rules. And one of the rules was that they could not fraternize with us because they knew that we were going to speak the truth. And when you start learning the truth, you, as an outsider, as an immigrant, you're going to look at America differently. And the irony of it is that the United States of America treated everyone that came here with the same disregard that they treated us. The only difference is that they did it to us for 246 years. They could only do it to them for one or two generations. And so it made those people angry, the Germans, the Irish. And what did they do? They made sure their kids went to be doctors, lawyers, that kind of thing, so that when they ran into some type of legal problem or some type of medical issue, you go over there and talk to Antonio, go over there and talk to Milo. And that is what they did. And they used and manipulated it. Then they got into politics and they began to be lobbied by big businesses and corporations who had a different agenda. They wanted to be sure their product got out there. They had an entirely different agenda. And so that's when they started making policy statutes. Remember we talked about that? And not law. And your police became the policy enforcers because they have to enforce the policies of these big companies and corporations. I mean, think about the Kennedys. They were in the oil business. Do you think he walked around and got that oil land and was very nice and amenable? No, he took it, killed people to get it. You know, I mean, that was how they functioned.
Funded Hitler. Man, get me started with that tonight.
Okay, but whatever Hitler did, he had the people, he had Stalin and all of them right there with him, helping him. Okay, and then think about, look at this one thing. Hitler was dark haired, dark eyed, and olive tone complexion. His mother was Jewish. She was a Sephardic Jew. Someone in her family married into the Hebrew Israelites and became a Sephardic Jew. Hitler was mad what happened to German people from World War One because they locked Germany out because Germany is a landlocked country, so they locked them out of everything, and Hitler got mad. His father was a German and his mother was Jewish, and he got mad. I'm not standing for him. I just want you to see. So his mindset was, I'm going to have the national, um, Nazi is an acronym, the National something Zionist Party. And then with that, we're going to take over. And he took over everything, industry, education, all of that. He did all of that. And at first, the German people loved him. And then they realized he's off. He's really off. There's something wrong with him. So when you have a new world order, and I've asked you all to go look at Project 21, please read it. It falls under the New World Order. Read that one and read eugenics. Because what it does is that it shows you what these 100 families are trying to do. And what's happening is that the wool is off. People can now see, those who are enlightened enough to see, can see that what they believed in was based on lies. And now what's happening is that they're going to have to look for truth. And they have to go and do their due diligence and look at historical information that pulls it to that point. Not everybody in Europe. Europe is named after Europa, a Phoenician queen. She didn't look white. And King James was a black man, like Charlotte and Queen Elizabeth and Catherine the Great. They were all black people. Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, they were all black. They were not allowed to perform. And so that animosity built up. And read about the Medici, D-E, like medicine, M-E-D-I-C-I, the Medici. Read about them. They're black.
So
Everybody had to bend down to them. They're black.
So Sister Azima,
Mm-hmm.
and this we're gonna pivot to this to the second part of our show, and the reason I'm telling everybody in the chat is because this is part one of this show. We're gonna have a part two because it's really something I don't think people realize that's about to happen next month. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is, but something historic is going to happen next month that haven't happened in over 100 years.
Wait a minute, in August or in July?
In August.
Okay.
And I want people to be aware and what role and the significance, because it affects everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about that the next show when we do part two. But the second portion of this show, we're going to talk about the prodigal daughter of St. Louis. Sister Azima, you guys in the chat, Sister Azima is an East St. Louis native. Would be. Okay, go ahead.
I'm from St. Louis, not my parents are from East St. Louis.
Yeah. Now she, as we would say, she comes from the soil.
Hmm.
This is what she knows. She knows the landscape. She's been with us for almost a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I was living. I had moved.
Right.
We did our first show right before I moved, right?
Right.
Okay, did almost a year because I moved a year ago, and she's very abreast of what's going on, right? So I'm gonna read something, Sister Azima, real quick, and
okay.
I can't see you. I purposely didn't share the screen, but I'm gonna read it about your prodigal daughter of St. Louis.
Oh yes. Okay.
Jasmine Crockett drops out of race for top oversight committee Democrat. Last week, Jasmine Crockett dropped out of race. Representative Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas, has bowed out of the race to become the top Democratic on a key committee that is currently probing former President Joe Biden's alleged mental decline. Democratic firebrand Crockett was gunning to become the next ranking member, a title given to the senior member of the minority party on the House Oversight Committee. It was clear by the numbers that my style of leadership, this is Jasmine Crockett's statement, it was clear by the numbers that my style of leadership is not exactly what they were looking for. And so I didn't think it was fair for me to then push forward and try to rebuke that, Crockett told reporters. House Democrats held the election during the weekly closed door caucus meeting Tuesday. Hold
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. However, in a small election by a key House Democrat panel on Monday night,
Mm-hmm.
Crockett and two others lost to Representative Robert Garcia,
Mm-hmm.
Democrat of California.
Mm-hmm.
Crockett signaled she came in last of the four, telling reporters on Tuesday. They were clear that I was the one that made the least sense in their minds. I accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you have to make sure that you are going to be able to work with leadership, if you are going to go into a leadership position,
Mm-hmm.
I think the people may be disappointed, but at the end of the day, we've got to move forward in this country. We've got to move forward for this world, and I don't want to be an opinion. She promised to still be loud and proud as a team player for Democrats. Okay. The House Oversight Committee, led by Chairman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, played a marquee role in last week's Congress as Republicans pursued an impeachment inquiry against the previous president.
Mm-hmm.
Comer's panel is back in the headlines now for another Biden focused probe, this time looking to allegations that the former senior vice president aides covered up signs of his decline.
Mm-hmm.
And Jasmine later made a statement, you guys, that she is going to focus on grassroots. You and I, grassroots advocacy, working with Reverend Sharpton, Jamal Bryant, and the likes. Pride of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Sister Azima, you tongue tied? See,
Right
see,
now, Maxine Waters got locked out. She's from St. Louis, guy, and then we got Jasmine Crockett. You know,
First Angel says she's from St. Louis too. Well, y'all gotta take this L.
yeah, it's the sad part is that everybody thinks people from St. Louis are very loud. No, that's not how that is. Anybody can be loud, but you have to be able to be concise and you have to be able to get things done. She couldn't get anything done. That's the problem. And Maxine Waters lost her ability to be able to walk across the aisle and get anything done.
Let
We,
me ask you,
uh-huh,
Sister Azima, right? And,
uh-huh.
and and Earth Angel brings up a good point that you would think that somebody, yeah, St. Louis is a big city, but if she claims that came from a background where her father was a minister, somebody would have known Jasmine Crockett from St. Louis and been like, I know her. We went to school together, but she went to private school. I remember her family or something. But anyway, let me ask you, because we see how a lot of black women portray themselves on TV. And even you said earlier when we were talking about black women being the focal point of what's going on. As an elder,
Mhm.
you think that the women nowadays lack decorum?
I think as a nation of people, we have lost our center, male and female. I began to see that debauchery when they started doing things like the Real Housewives, and they went from just having the people from New Jersey and Philadelphia and some parts of California to having the black people in Atlanta. And the sad part is that it doesn't matter what you want. You, Quentin, me, Azima, the people out here looking at our podcast, our podcasters, podcastees. It's all about hype. And if you can't produce conflict, hype, and all that kind of stuff, they're not going to keep you. That extra money makes a big difference. When they do well, they pull in $100,000 an episode, not $100,000 for all five, the five people. It's $100,000 for each of them. That's a nice chunk of change. At the end of a year, that's 1.2 million. And you're not doing 1.2 million in your regular lifestyle. And so you have to create drama. The problem is that over time, you blur the lines. And when you're blurring the lines, then it becomes a problem. Also, I think what happens is that it prevents you from being centered. When I say centered, I really mean humble. Okay. There's I'm not big politics for me, but my father was an alderman. A couple of times he had to be mayor in between certain things. My brother followed in my father's footsteps. It is nothing, even on a small scale, there is nothing like it. Sometimes it feels so many people want your attention and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get your attention. That can be a powerful place to be. And if you're not centered enough to help people, even though I was never the politician, because of my family, a lot of people would come to me and ask me to do things, favors. Let me get me in touch with your brother or your dad. Help me do so and so and so and so. I know you have some inside scoops on certain things. And what happens is that you get all of the users in your life. And then that becomes the lifestyle you know. And what it does is that it distorts who you see as you. And in that distortion, you end up like Maxine Waters and Jasmine Crockett. Now, if Jasmine Crockett had just come out the box and said, hey, I went to a private school all of my life. I was fortunate enough to have that. I don't agree. Now, she's supposed to be an attorney. I don't agree with the things that I see happening to Black people or, to whatever group demographic she's dealing with. That would be one thing. But no, she feels based on what the Democratic Party needs, and not just the Democratic Party, it's the New World Order. She's going to do what they want.
The performative, the performative politics, the perform, like you said, like the neck rolling, the eyes, as we would say in our culture, the clap back, and just I call it the loud and wrong. Like she could be loud as hell and be totally wrong. Even as a basic, like you said, even as a basic attorney,
Mm-hmm.
you're sitting up here and you're telling an audience that the illegal immigrants didn't break the law. Instead of her saying what they did is not a criminal felony offense by sneaking in the country, it's
No, it
still
is.
an
It
offense.
is.
Yeah,
No, it is
yeah.
a criminal felony offense. It is. It is. Because
And
of
because
that,
she's not able to articulate that the
no, she
right
doesn't.
way,
She doesn't want to. Her salary is 174,000. It's public record. She's been there 2 years, but she's net worth is almost 12 million. Where is that coming from? She's got a 1.5 million condo. She's got a what is it? Like a guest house or retreat house is worth 3.5 million, and then she's got some other things, and it comes up just under 12 million. Where is that coming from?
hmm,
And before we even talk about, you said the neck rolling and all that, the first place you would see that was in what I call the Step and Fetcher movies from the 30s and the 40s. Okay. Those were good actors and actresses, but they had to act like they were the dumb slave, you know, especially in Gone with the Wind, and then look at Celie, in Color Purple. Movies like that always portray us in a dim light, in a negative aspect, no matter what. A lot of people love Tyler Perry. I don't watch any of his movies because it does the same thing. It's just a modern day version of it. And so the only time you'll see, in my opinion, really good movies from him is when he's the main character. Now he says he did Medea because it reminded him of the women that he had grown up with, how strong they were. That's great. If that's what it is, it was good. It got him going in the direction he goes. But most of the movies that I see that end up being produced and we looked at always show us fearful, um, exaggerated movements, because that's the conditioning. That's your conditioning. You've been trained to accept that.
Now, let me ask you, Sister Azima, because we discuss her, and sometimes we get a we get our personal
Mhm,
laugh off of what she does and how she portrays herself to be.
mhm.
Do you think she, as the great Paul Mooney once said, everybody gets their nigga wake up call? Do you
Mhm.
think that her not getting elected by that committee was her wake up call? Like you doing all this for this party, they don't even think of you as a leader.
Well, here's something. Because I'm retired now, I can watch many of the congressional hearings. If you've ever watched Jasmine Crockett, and I know most of the time she's on that same committee with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I know the dynamics between them is not good, but Marjorie does follow Rogers' rules of regulations and decorum when she's holding a meeting. The minute Jasmine comes in and sits down, she purposely turns her mic on, but turns it to the side, and she mumbles loud enough to signify in the mic. At many of the meetings, they would tell the Madam Chair, other members in the meeting would tell the Madam Chair, Marjorie Greene, turn off her mic and only turn it on when it's time for her to speak.
And this goes on a lot.
It go Yeah, very much. And so what I want you to see is that you have co-workers that are just disturbers all the time. You don't work well with them. Nobody works well with them. As as a co-worker, you probably avoid them. As management, they get dinged a lot. And so think now, when she really has a bill that she wants, no one deals with her. When she really had a good bill and had presented it, unfortunately, she didn't articulate because her mind was all over the place, blaming Trump for a lot of things and Elon Musk. She did have something she needed to present. And what the members, not Miss Green, but what the members told her is that because, and these were her Democratic members, is that because she spends a large degree of her time berating the current president, nobody wants to take the time to work with you, because what we see on TV is the same action she takes when she's talking with them. So in this case, if I'm talking to, let's say, Dr. Short about you, Quentin, I'm going to say, oh, Quentin makes me sick. And I'm mumbling all of that. And then when I'm meeting with Dr. Short and I want to tell him something because I have a good idea, I'll say, well, it's a great idea, but Quentin doesn't support that. And these are the things that she would do, even when she was meeting in private sectors with people across the aisle that have the power to assist her in accomplishing her goal. She'd have to throw these digs in. And what happened is that a lot of them, you get tired of it. It's okay to do it in front of the cameras, but now you're doing it because it's personal. And
Okay.
when you make it personal in politics, people don't deal with you.
okay, this time, Sam, I'm glad you brought that up because I am a kid that whose grandparents went to their house.
Mm-hmm.
C-SPAN was on the TV.
Mm-hmm.
I would see a lot of the stuff that most young people wouldn't want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And let me ask you, um, in your time, Republican or Democrat, name a few people that even though you may didn't agree with them politically, where they were good congresswomen, good representatives. They knew how to. I don't agree with you. You're on a different side of the aisle, but I have a bill. Let me explain my bill. I may need you to co-sign my bill, and vice versa. Name some people who you've seen that really know how to work across the aisle and get stuff done for their constituents.
Cynthia McKinney.
Oh boy, you want there early, huh?
Cynthia McKinney. Shirley Chisholm. Okay. Um, I would say, what's the brother? Daniels, Byron Daniels. Uh, Carrie Lake. I don't always agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I deal with her rules and protocols. She knows the rules and protocols, and she knows how to use them and how to put her animosity on the back burner. Unfortunately, Miss Crockett, she's not a young person. She's 44 years old. She acts like she's 20. And you can't work with her. There's another group of people I watch. It's pals, and it's a group of black women who they have a podcast and they sit around and talk. And they're in Texas, in her district, and they had people come. They in their audience. They had people who basically said that when they went to Miss Crockett. Now, this is based on um, Partners of the Patriots, Partners of Patriots, PAPS. And it's a podcast, and it's black women. It's like four black women. I want to say they're the same age as Jasmine Crockett, between 40s to early 50s. And basically, they can give political overviews, and they're very good at it. And I love it. I learn a lot about Texas and what's going on with Texas from their political positioning and how they get that information. I can go research it. The problem with Miss Crockett was that when the people in her district would come to visit her, she was unavailable, or the people would take their information and it would never be referred or given to her. She never received it. Um, she was slow to respond, and these were not just Miss So and so down the street complaining about the water or the gas. These were people who were getting ready to bring a $500,000 or $4 billion project into her district to hire minority people. And that included um, Black folks and the Latino population and the indigenous population. They were bringing in business, and they couldn't get it off the ground because certain paperwork had to be dealt with through her office. And they did not speak highly of her. They were so upset, and I don't mean one or two, but more along the lines of a dozen, because that's all they had the time for, was a dozen of these people. And the sad part was that they decided to give their vote to somebody else. He's a black man, a veteran, and all of this, and he's very articulate. And they're looking to throw their party, their money and support behind him, because that person has been able to help these people get their businesses off the ground the way they should. Miss Crockett doesn't make herself available to her constituents. The problem is that many of the black folks now who are totally against Donald Trump, they have made it personal. They don't make themselves available for their constituents. They only make themselves available for a core group of people that think like them, act like them, talk like them. Then they get the benefits.
TV screen. I always say this that Jasmine Crockett wants to be a pundit. She wants to do podcasts. She wants to be on TV. I don't think she wants to be a politician because they're aiming for celebrity. Her and a bunch of other people are aiming to be seen and not able to get shit done. If you have an elected official, they work for you. And I would never want my local politician or my national politician saying they're willing. I don't want to segue into what are we going to talk about part two, but
Mhm,
when you sit there and you say, I'm not going to work with a particular person,
mhm,
melanated folk don't got time to wait.
mhm,
People are hurting. People are suffering. Bills is high. Gas is high. Food is high. We live in food deserts.
mhm.
Property tax is high. And you telling me as an elected official that you're not willing to help me because you're not willing to work across the aisle. This is why you're there. This is why it is a certain amount of Republicans. This is why it is a certain amount of Democrats to bring balance.
Mhm,
So if you're not willing to negotiate on my and others' behalf, I don't need you.
mhm, mhm.
And we see this, and this has been going on. And I don't, I could dump on the young lady if I want to, or what she hasn't really done. Nothing. The only thing that she did do that we really know about is when her and Margie had the thing, and she said what she said, and then she started selling T-shirts, and it's like, look, are you representing the people of Texas? Even LaMonica MacGyver, who came into question about her seat, she sat there. She's trying to raise money for her defense of getting arrested by ICE for
Mhm.
touching the ICE agent. She's literally asking the people to donate to her defense for getting arrested and indicted.
Talking about Miss LaMonica MacGyver?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of speculation with her that I know about too, and I'm gonna address it. I'm gonna address it really really good one day. I've been holding back, but just know that she became a congresswoman woman under some very very shady situation. Donald Payne Jr. had died, the seat was vacant, and even her running and winning was shady. But that's what they do. They select you. They don't elect you.
Right.
But listen, great conversation.
Mhm.
We're gonna be ready for part two so we can kick some butt. Part two is gonna be hilarious. I think I want everybody to know what's going on, but I ain't gonna tell nobody yet.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Any final thoughts before we close?
No, I'm just looking at her political record. And she was absent most of the time for her bills. Wow. Okay. She has 0 laws enacted. She's on the 40th fewest bills compared to everybody else. This is Miss Crockett. She had she sponsored
She has
200.
an she has an authored a bill, and she's been
Yes,
absent on bills that signed.
yes. She co-sponsored the third bill says she co-sponsored. She co-sponsored 635 bills. What that means is that I'm going in today to vote. It's like having a staff meeting and it's a head count. Boop, she was there.
Yay and nay or abstain.
Right. So I mean you can look up her congressional record and they'll tell you. It'll show. It shows. And that's the problem. You need somebody who can, when you're in a crisis, in a crunch, to
Mm.
help you navigate. They don't have necessary, most of us don't want them to do it. What they want is for you to show me how to do it. Okay. She doesn't know how to teach people to fish. because she's too busy being the queen of the fish. And I'm
With
done.
that, we're gonna close out. You guys take care in the chat, and we'll see you guys next time. I don't know when we're gonna do part 2. It might be before Tuesday, or it might be Tuesday. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna get it together.
Okay.
Just know that. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button so you get when we do something within the next 30, 40 days. It's gonna be not a lot of bad changes, but it's gonna be some good changes with the channel. I'm gonna be doing a lot more different stuff, not a lot more content. I've been really, really busy lately, but I intend to do something uh, a lot more. But until then, you guys take care, man, and we'll see you guys soon.